Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the series from CMU's Scott Institute for Energy Innovation at Carnegie Mellon University. Very glad to have you here this morning and glad that you could join us. We have an esteemed group of panelists today talking about solar and supply chain issues, and we're really looking forward to that. Quickly though, I want to run through a few things about the Scott Institute. Many of you know us, but we are the energy hub for research at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We focus on collaborative research, strategic partnerships, education, entrepreneurship, and policy outreach. We are really all of the activities that we do, including our programming like this, are aiming towards a sustainable, low carbon energy future. So the purpose of this webinar series, which we started in March, was to focus squarely on recovery from COVID-19. So as we've seen additional disruptions over the summer and continuing, we find it's important to reflect and to have thought leadership come together to really think through strategies and ideas about how we can continue to move forward. I always like to say at the beginning, though, that we are still in a pandemic. We do have these disruptions still around us, and we want to say a special thank you to all of our frontline workers, and that's across the board, be it the folks that are keeping the light on or helping to keep our streets safe. So thank you. So today's webinar, as I mentioned, is called Energy Supply Chain Disruption and Impacts, Perspectives on How Businesses Build and Sustain Value. I want to say a special thank you this morning to our panelist companies who have allowed them to spend this 45 minutes with us. BCI Technology Investments, Solaria, Invinity, and Wright. So we have a slew of scheduled events coming up virtually this fall. So no matter where you're dialing in from, you can catch the action. We do have a student hackathon that we're doing September 29 and 30. So if you're interested as a student in participating, we still have spots available for those that are located in the Pittsburgh region at Pitt and at CMU. And we also there are sessions that you can watch outside of the university if you're interested. We have 4 distinguished lectures that are all listed on this slide from ICF International, Westinghouse, LG Chem, and the Department of Energy, in addition to webinars, one on solar and one on nuclear that are coming up this fall. Special announcement as well, we are a power connector for the American Made Solar Prize, and with all of you in the solar industry, we want to remind you that innovations are welcome in that solar prize competition. So you can submit your ideas, the deadline is October 8th, and we can help you get your submission ready through mentoring and connecting with other partners. So please let us know if you're thinking about submitting. And if you have a topic or speaker suggestion, if you want to pull one of these panels together, much as Josh Beck did when he reached out to me with this idea and these great panelists, I'd like to offer Danielle Agreement as a great contact for you. And you can see this schedule of events on our website. I also want to say a special thanks today to Amanda King-Finkenbender. She has been with the Scott Institute for 4 years, at CMU for 5, and she is moving to a new position. We're very excited for her, but wanted to say a special thank you to Amanda. So these are our esteemed panelists today. I need to pull up their bios just to make sure I get it right. So first we have Josh Beck, who is the Managing Director and Chief Investment Officer of BCI Technology Investments. So he's worked in international M&A and technical project management for 18 years and successfully launched operations throughout North America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. Matt Harper is a clean tech entrepreneur and product developer. As Chief Commercial Officer of Invinity Energy Systems, Matt is responsible for the commercialization and deployment of Invinity's groundbreaking vanadium flow battery-based energy storage solutions. Suvi Sharma is responsible for leading Solaria's strategic initiatives as it extends the application of its technology. An industry thought leader in PV innovation, he is a seasoned entrepreneur with 20 years of experience in company formation, fundraising, talent recruitment, business development, global operations of innovative companies in renewable energy, information technology, and private equity. Last but not least is Sunny Yang. who is a corporate attorney in both the United States and the People's Republic of China, who focuses her practice on international business matters and trade. She represents Chinese entities doing business in the US, as well as US entities pursuing investments and operating in China. And so unlike some of our past sessions, Josh is gonna he's got a couple of slides he wants to show us, which is why we haven't gone to the big pictures yet. So Josh, I'm gonna give you a second to sort of talk through this landscape before we go with all of us and our pictures live.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for everyone for sharing your valuable time to join us today, including the panelists. I just wanted to walk through 3 quick graphics to help kind of center our minds around the conversation today. So as Anna had said, the theme for today is really kind of value building. What we've seen across the renewable energy sector has been really value creation and further building over the last 10 years through new technology introductions and operational execution. So it can really be argued that over the last 10 years, the solar industry has done better than any other market sector at reducing product costs via best practice design for manufacturing and cost on engineering activities. This was further supported certainly by a massive influx of financial support from international government organizations and entities in private industry to help kind of reach economies of scale very fast. So what we're looking at here is Lazard's levelized cost of energy. This is really a great graphic to show over the last 10-year period, the systemic drop in costs that we're seeing particularly at utility scale solar deployments and why we're seeing this be so competitive. This has represented a 90% cost reduction over a 10-year period in utility scale solar hardware and overall operational costs. This slide actually shows the same graphic except on the energy storage side. Energy storage has experienced an 85% drop in costs over the same period, and that is and through the work of Matt Harper and others within the industry, that continues to be costs continue to be whittled out regularly. So what we've actually seen here overall has been, and if you could go to the last graphic. So what we've seen overall is a direct correlation between cost reductions and increased market share growth within utility scale solar in particular. So then this has gone from a 4% of all new energy generation creation in 2010 to 40% of all new energy generation in 2019.
Thank you, Josh. So with that, I'm going to ask a few questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please do put it into the Q&A, and we will answer those questions as we can through the next few minutes. So my first question to all of the panelists, and I think, Josh, you probably might want to start with an answer on this one. So what are the most important factors for leadership to consider when trying to build value and flexibility in uncertain times? How do decisions during times like these impact short and long-term growth trajectory?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of conversation between ourselves and the portfolio companies that we invest in. And I think that the one word that it comes down to is fundamentals, right? We're seeing that companies that retreat to their core comfort area and kind of look like, hey, we've always been successful at doing this, let's not rock the boat. They're facing substantial economic headwinds at the moment. Those entrepreneurs and organizations who are saying, okay, this is what has made us successful in the past. How do we galvanize those kind of core kind of competitive advantages that we have as an organization to kind of launch us into what's happening next? It has really been vital. So I always kind of explain this to our entrepreneurs that we support as, go back to the fundamentals, revisit your business plan, reestablish your milestones, and really kind of as an executive leadership team, all of your conversations should be focused on establishing and promoting your North Star, as we refer to them, your North Star goals as an organization. By doing that, you're really kind of painting an organizational picture of excitement, of where the horizon or the crest of the wave is. And it really keeps people kind of marching forward. And it's been really remarkable the amount and quality of entrepreneurs that have drawn into the sector around those type of goals and continue to have a lot of success. I think another big part of that is really kind of increasing the strategic planning aspects of your organization, kind of refining what your competitive advantage is, identifying what the market landscape is, identifying kind of sub-markets of revenue generation opportunity that are kind of parallel or in concert with kind of your core objectives. I think that what we've found is organizations that really kind of are looking at the forest rather than individual trees are able to find better strategic partnerships, which really help catapult them even further into kind of a successful paradigm of growth. So certainly, you know, market stresses like COVID-19, they expose a lot of problem statements, not only within an organization, but kind of as a market segment as a whole, right? So what we've really found is kind of incremental growth of kind of boosting power efficiency, optimization of energy storage resources, and really kind of honing in on reducing ongoing operation and maintenance costs. Individuals who can really kind of poke those different market segments to kind of find where their value proposition best fits into that paradigm are doing exceedingly well. And to the second half of your question, in terms of, you know, how do you plan for long-term strategic growth? You know, I think that proactive management is so critical. Sitting on your hands is the absolute worst thing that you can do right now. So acquiring new market share in terms of you know, market expansion and strategic partnership expansion, it helps make you more nimble. It helps kind of consolidate SG&A overhead costs, which makes you more cost competitive. And I think that, you know, one of a core example that we've seen just in recent months has been the Sunrun and Vivint merger, right? So then you had Sunrun, which was about 9.5% market share. You had Vivint at just almost about 8% market share, but they were really eating each other's lunch. And you know, the studies have really shown that the competitive nature of the two organizations was really driving up their costs of actual customer acquisition. So that merger, you know, they were able to reach economies of scale a lot faster, as a tangible example.
Any of our other panelists want to respond to that one?
Sure. Look, I could jump in briefly. I think that Josh, you're absolutely right. Sort of, you know, stick to your knitting, focus on that North Star, figure out what it is that, you know, organizationally you need to achieve. I think the thing that we've found is that the flip side to that coin is, how do you make sure that once you've put that point on the map that you're able to keep driving towards it? And to me, it all comes back to a question of diversity of supply, diversity of sort of how you execute your operations, and diversity of thought inside the organization, right? We went, at our company, we went through a merger 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And, you know, what that has meant is that we've had an ample supply of people, you know, testing and pushing and working out different strategies for executing towards that ultimate North Star goal. And that, you know, that sort of constant revisiting of how we're able to, you know, achieve what we're trying to get done, especially in an environment like we've seen in the last 6 months, where the world has changed from what we had previously thought to be true, has been very, very valuable.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. You know, it is challenging to be prescriptive because each industry, each business is different. The thing that I've seen is, probably now more than ever, it's really important for the leadership to not outsource market research, industry research, what's going on. It's really critical to have the leadership's eyes and ears on the ground, talking to customers, talking to partners, and making decisions based on that, because things are so dynamic and they're changing so quickly. And so it requires more vigilance of reading the tea leaves, if you will, in terms of what's happening out there. And then the other piece, adding on to what Matt said, I couldn't agree more. Just really looking at, you know, the risk and opportunity thing, they're two sides of a coin. And the diversification of whether it's supply or customer base, it's really critical. And that also then opens up new opportunities as a result of that, in terms of that risk management. We found that at Solaria to be the case. So to me, like, those are really the two most critical things that I can see that are, you know, prescriptive for a lot of the different industries and companies out there.
Great. Here's another question. So should U.S. renewable energy companies be planning to expand internationally? So how important will international markets be for U.S. companies to meet their growth goals? And are there any strategies that you've seen that we should be using to mitigate downstream supply chain issues, as well as risks associated with things like COVID? So Sunny, how about you start with that one?
Sure. So I think whether U.S. renewable energy companies should expand internationally depends on many factors. So it's not like a one fit for all approach. You have to think about the type of business it is in, the the status of this specific product or this specific industry, domestically and internationally, the risk factors of the business, the growth potential of a particular business, domestically and internationally, and most importantly, what is the goal to expand internationally? What do you want to achieve by expanding internationally, right? But in my experience, helping many companies with their international expansion efforts, like international market can be very important for US companies to meet their growth goals and potentials. But companies should really carefully think like, what do you want to achieve? What's the goal to expand internationally? And what are the risk and like, in terms of business risk, legal risk before taking ahead. Like obviously the international market is not really for everyone. So I think for some certain companies, like if you are mainly focusing on the domestic market, your products geared for the domestic market, you probably do not want to expand internationally at this moment. But maybe for some companies, that's great opportunities for you. So for example, I think many of you know like the relationship between the US-China are at their historical lowest point probably in decades, but the US companies and brands are actually doubling down in China anyway. So you probably find that strange, but many of those companies want to have access to the buying power in China. So that's something you need to consider in your international expansion. Another point I want to make for this first question, there's maybe some real opportunity for international expansion in the current economic climate. In the last couple of months, with the global spread of the COVID-19, we have seen a very sharp decline in the international market demands. But this probably also means we expect a very strong rebound of the economy and in the industry in the international market. So this may be very important because there has been a lot of talks about the recession in the US domestic market. So you probably want to expand internationally just to show that risk. In terms of the second question, like the strategies companies can take to mitigate the downstream supply chain risk during and after the COVID-19, I cannot answer that question in a few words, but I want to point out a few important points for people to consider. Like you really have to look at your contract with the suppliers, with your customers, and you have to map out the complete end-to-end supply chain. Like what's your supply chain? What's your risk there? And you try to diversify your supply chain. From the business perspective, like building resilience supply chain in the wake of COVID-19 means you have to recognize that a pandemic, like something like this, could really happen anywhere in the future, anywhere in the world, right? You have to build that into consideration. And so like the key component of that strategy is flexibility. You have to build in flexibility. That means like the ability to switch quickly from different production sources in response to future challenges. And one final comment is that the decision to move production requires long-term planning and commitment. It's not something you can achieve overnight. And this is probably very challenging right now as businesses are trying to conserve their costs, right, during this economic downturn. So this is not something that can be achieved easily, but you really have to think about that, be proactive, taking this into consideration and map out your supply chain.
So are any of the others sort of kind of aligned with this question, thinking about international expansion during this time?
I'll respond. I think the question about international expansion, it's complex. And my answer would be, it depends. I think on the product or technology side, it makes sense to generally go international, to broaden the market, reduce risk, and also make one more competitive. We found, for example, like in the US, we sell solar panels. It's a protected market in many ways. There's tariffs, there's duties. You go to Europe, it's not. And so to be really competitive, you have to be even more competitive in Europe than you do in the US. So it can strengthen the business, but it's complicated. International business is always a lot harder than it seems on paper. And there's a lot of different nuances in doing business in each place. And I think it depends on where, for example, US companies have the easiest time in Europe. Going and selling your product in China is not easy. I think something like Fortune 500 companies, 2% or less of their revenue comes from China today. That shows how challenging it can be. Just like it's so challenging for Chinese companies to brand their products here. So I think it's really very dependent on the specific situation, but in general, it's worth definitely looking at, given just the level of geopolitical risks that do exist with different economies right now.
Yeah, look, I can give just a couple of examples from the past 6 months of why that international diversification has been important for us. Through in our business development and sales efforts, really dried up in North America and the UK sort of from kind of April onwards. Comparatively, starting in sort of late spring, Asia came very much back online, and we were able to, drive forward a lot of the commercial initiatives we've been working on over there. So, and similarly, Australia carried through, until about 2 months ago, when suddenly they had a second wave, which was far bigger than the first. Look, I think it all argues for the, again, that point about sort of diversity and where you're able to sell products around the world, and making sure that, to your point, Suvi, at reasonable cost and impact on the organization, if you can expand what you're trying to do, that variety of geographies can be hugely beneficial, especially in the kind of disruptions we've been seeing recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of that is right on point. Well, I like to focus on the strategic partnership aspects of this, right? Or I guess in other words, that your best offense is a good defense, right? Having an in-country partner for international expansion is so critical. They're on the ground. They've got the political relationships. They understand what the macroeconomic situation or the government incentives are. They're able to protect your IP on the grounds much easier than you can remotely. So, we focus heavily on strategic partnership creation and development.
Next question. And Matt, I think this might be a good one for you.
Great, yeah.
How are new and existing technologies contributing to energy infrastructure? Are you seeing changes in how innovation is serving the grid and contributing to energy efficiency? And I'm actually going to pair that with one of the questions that came in, which is, can the grid handle the influx of new renewable energy generation? And if not, what's the best way forward with energy delivery? Thank you for that question.
Sure, that's a great question, and one that is very much at the top of mind for a lot of people in the industry right now. Look, the new and existing technologies are playing a huge part of the way we currently produce and generate and consume electricity. I think the degree to which this has become a much more complex system. It's much more. There's a lot more pieces in play than there were even 10 years ago. You can argue whether new technology is sort of the cause or the effect of that complexity, but I think it's here one way or the other. What it certainly does, though, is that complexity does have both opportunities and challenges associated with it. At Invinity, we talk a lot about sort of the 3Ds of the future grid: digitization, decarbonization, and decentralization, as being sort of the dominant forces that we see over and over again in triggering change in the industry. In our view, all three of those kind of walk hand in hand, and new technologies are promoting all of those. Just as some examples, decarbonization is being promoted by the decentralized structure, where sort of megawatt scale renewable generation is taking over from gigawatt scale fossil fuel plants. Similarly, decentralization is being promoted by digitization, where the amount of control and data that you can get coming off of these comparatively decentralized sources is allowing us to rely on them far more as reasonable and critical sources of supply. I think what ties all of those forces together is this focus on how can we increase flexibility on the electric grid, which is not only important to the question that we're going to get to on stability of supply from renewables, but especially in the face of demand shocks like we've seen through COVID, and even things like some of the rolling blackouts that we've seen out in California related to forest fires and whatnot. All of those things can benefit from that decentralized, digitized strategy. And we think that that's only really going to accelerate into the future. To the question on energy efficiency, look, our view is that efficiency, of course, matters, especially from a consumption perspective. Anytime you can use less energy, you're going to be better off. Our view, though, is that it's maybe a secondary effect in terms of how we optimize significant portions of the electric grid. We talked about levelized cost of energy at the top of this discussion. When you look at batteries, for example, the efficiency of those systems has a minor impact on the change in LCOE as compared with things like throughput. How much energy can you put through a battery in a year? And calendar life, how many years can you be depending on these resources for? So while I think the efficiency is important, it's not necessarily a dominant factor. The reason I think we still focus on efficiency a lot is because efficiency is a huge deal in a fuel-based system. When you are burning dinosaurs and pumping out CO2, efficiency is hugely important because every megawatt hour you generate has a cost. And when you're talking about a renewable-based system with a comparatively low marginal cost of generation, it is absolutely, in our view, far more reasonable to be able to trade off lower cost, lower carbon energy for a higher total number of megawatt hours that ends up getting consumed. Wrapping back around to your first question on can the grid handle the influx of renewable sources? I absolutely think it can. I mean, I think that part of what we need to see change is not so much from a technical or a security of supply perspective, but really the market structures that underpin how our grid operates. The experiment that was started 20 to 30 years ago in terms of using a market system to regulate and optimize how our grid delivers electricity, at low cost and very, very reliably, I think has been a resounding success. We just need to make sure that the regulatory structures that underpin the current electric grid are able to evolve fast enough to anticipate, these changes in terms of how supply is being provided.
I'd like to chime in because living in California, this has become Matt and I do. This has become a real issue and question of can the grid handle all these renewable distributed assets? And the answer, I believe, is actually no. But I don't believe it can handle the current infrastructure either. We have to upgrade the grid, irrespective. One of the things that I think made U.S. a leader in the world was investment in public infrastructure, roads. Electric grid to me is a public good. It's a public infrastructure, and we cannot imagine that we don't need to invest in that anymore. We have to upgrade it, irrespective of distributed renewable assets. But within an upgraded grid, absolutely, you get a more resilient grid with distributed renewable assets. So they do go hand in hand, but I think it's imminent for us to really do that soon, because otherwise we don't have really the infrastructure that can handle all the things that are going on, aging of it, including climate change issues that are causing more issues around resiliency of the grid as it stands today.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Suvi. And this kind of flows into the governmental side as well. And I think that what I'm encouraged by that, certainly there's a lot of different perspectives of whether a trade war is the most effective means to kind of drive economic priorities. But one thing that's kind of starting to emanate out of Washington, D.C. is this kind of bridging the gap between the parties in terms of in terms of what the priorities for infrastructure are, right? So job creation, they can all agree on job creation. Okay, that's going to be a natural thing of infrastructure improvements, including the electrical grid. The other one is national security. Distributed generation actually helps. You don't have a centralized nuclear power facility anymore that can be taken out. Distributed energy makes a more resilient grid, and it allows for more kind of national strategic kind of comfortability, if you will.
So a next question. How has the ongoing U.S. trade war with China impacted companies as it relates to supply chain execution efforts? I guess that's the big question. What legal strategies are U.S. companies using today, and how will this impact future operations and international strategic partnerships? And Sunny, I think you're a great person to start this question.
Sorry, Sunny, you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I think the U.S.-China tension definitely had a big impact on the supply chain, and we have seen pretty big drop in the U.S. manufacturing importing from China. So for example, based on the data issued by the Department of Commerce Bureau of Economic Analysis, the total US manufacturing import from 2018 was 13 billion, but that dropped 90 billion in 2019 to 2,174 billion. That wasn't too much in 2019 because we haven't had the COVID-19, right? But by the COVID-19 started, I feel like many companies started to realize like, oh, that's like a wake up for many companies. They very quickly realized that, well, we need to diversify our supply chain. What do I do to build up resilience in my supply chain? So many people started to ask that questions. So to some extent, the COVID-19 has achieved what the Trump administration was not able to achieve by initiating that trade war. It's like people started to really look at the supply chain and shifting their manufacturing to outside China to back to the US. So there has been an ongoing effort. We call that reshore and onshore. That meaning moving the supply chain back to the US, that's reshore, or moving their supply chain to other countries outside of China. So some other lower cost countries, so that in an effort to diversify their supply chain to build up their supply chain resilience. Going forward, I think China is still a very attractive total supply chain solution, as there are very few countries in the world where you can find almost everything you need, right, to build up something, whatever you want. I don't think there's any other country who has the ability to do that right now. The labor force maturity and the talent pool in China is still very attractive. And that's something many countries do not have to. So I have experience, I have clients move their manufacturing to some like other countries, Southeast Asia countries. Some challenges they have is like they have to ship other supplies, other materials from China to be able to be manufactured in Vietnam or other countries. And they found it's very challenging to with their labor force too, even though it's like the labor force like hourly rate it's cheaper, but it end up costing the same for some companies. So that's definitely a big consideration for the companies. But the big risk with China's supply chain is the politics, right? Which does not necessarily result in greater business efficiency. We know like the US is pressing companies to leave China really, really hard. They are really encouraging companies to return back to their home country. But China is also making its case, right? Why companies should stay, why they shouldn't leave. So in conclusion, like in the future, we are going to see some business return back to the US. We will see business stay in China. We will see business shifting to other countries. We'll see this trend continue in the near future, probably going to be a long term too. So ultimately, we are heading to is a more fragmented manufacturing. We will see many small factories of the world, rather than the idea of having one factory of the world, right? I think that's where we're going in the future. In terms of the legal strategies companies can take to address the supply chain, there are many. It's not like many people were saying, there's nothing I can do. There are trade, right? There are tariffs, nothing I can do. But there are many strategies companies can proactively take. I mentioned earlier that companies should review their contract and map out their end-to-end supply chain and to see where are the risks. And they should try to diversify their supply chain. So number one consideration in doing that is the country of origin rule analysis. So it's of crucial importance that the companies that you do the country of origin determination analysis to see if you can change the country of origin for the certain product from China to some other countries, so you can avoid the Section 301 tariffs imposed during the trade war. So you definitely should start with the U.S. country of origin rules, and you in your doing your supply chain planning, you should consider the considerations you should be given to shifting some of the components or maybe all of the components with China origin and shifting some or maybe all manufacturing outside of China. But where the supply chain will ultimately incorporate some level of Chinese origin or origin components or maybe manufacturing in China, then this country of origin determination should be comprehensive and documented. For example, I have clients moving certain portion of their manufacturing to Southeast Asia in order to change the country of origin of their products so they can avoid the tariffs, right? And also have clients, renewable energy clients, who was able to change the country of origin of its product to Mexico by importing certain components from China to Mexico and does certain processing and assembly in Mexico. And then they can change the country of origin to Mexico under the new US-Mexico-Canada Treaty. And then they can avoid the tariff in its entirety. So that's something companies should consider. But in doing that, you should look into the US country of origin rule as an exporting that comes from. And you really should take reasonable care because a mistake on doing that could be pretty huge. Some other strategy you can take is to identify ways to defer, eliminate, or recover the excess tariffs paid under the Section 301. For example, you can think about bounded warehouse, foreign trade zones, substitution drawback, and Chapter 97. Those are all measures you can consider trying to get rid of the tariff. You can explore strategies to minimize the customs value of imported products, re-evaluating current transfer pricing approach to see what you can do if you are a multinational company, and you can show the transfer pricing mechanism by shifting different prices and then somehow lower your import cost. And you can consider, you should evaluate whether imported goods meet the exclusion request granted by the custom authority and seek a duty refund. Companies should constantly monitor and examine the USTR notice to understand how they may impact the stakeholders' individual business and analyze its supply chain strategy. So that since the initiation of the trade war, there have been multiple opportunities for companies to file comments to request for product exclusions. So your product can be exempted from the Section 301 tariff. So take a look at the notice, carefully monitor that, think about what you can do in filing for exclusions. And also, like, companies should also consider whether to file legal actions challenging the tariff imposed during the trade war. So this Tuesday, the WTO has already ruled that the Section 301 tariff imposed by the US government to be illegal and in violation of the international trade rules. Also, there has been a number of domestic legal actions where the Court of International Trade has found various types of tariff imposed by the President and the USTR to be illegal. So there is one successful case related to the renewable energy industry where the plaintiff was able to challenge the product exclusion under the Section 201 duties that was illegal. And so that was a very successful legal challenge. So something a company can consider going forward. And there's also, there's one final comment is that there's a pending lawsuit right now challenging the entire List 3 and List 4A tariff as to be illegal and outside the statutory authority. So that's something the companies should consider too, whether they want to file their own lawsuit, because those remedies are not automatic. It's only given to the companies who filed the lawsuit. So in conclusion, there are many things companies can take. Companies should be proactive, evaluate their options depending on their own circumstances. And those things constantly change too. So you may have one remedies at one time, but you do not have one remedy at a certain time. Or you may not have anything available at one time. You may have something available a couple months later. So companies really should understand the legal landscape, closely monitor that to see what's available to you.
Thank you. That's a lot of information. Thank you so much, Sunny. I want to pivot before I do a final question, and this is a question that came in from Katie Ziegler, so thank you for that. It's a little bit of a different question for us, but it's to what degree do you feel environmental and sustainability related responsibilities are a core part of the energy investment positions that you're in? And does your opinion differ from prevailing thought in the industry? So Josh, why don't you take that one first?
Yeah, so this kind of almost refers into registering as a B Corp rather than a C Corp, right? And I think that the environmental and sustainability related aspects of your goals are fundamentally important. Whenever you're communicating your message, that kind of goes into that North Star goal of understanding that your team understands what you're trying to achieve, not only from a business level, but from a sustainability level. I think that where technology companies get into trouble is when they try to lead with the social or environmental impact of what their product does. Let's remember that we live in a capitalist economy, right? So people are making financial decisions based on where they can get the best IRR on their investments. And I think that a key success point for the renewable energy industry is that they've been able to package these things where package development projects, package technology investment opportunities that allow investors to be able to beat public markets, the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ, right? And so I think that you need to lead with the economic argument that, like, listen, we're rechanging and we're forming what a modern grid looks like. That is fundamentally important, and it results in massive growth. I think that what we're at north of 30% CAGR for the industry, right? So I think that leading with the economic argument drives investment dollars into the industry, which then serves the sustainability and environmental goals.
I'll chime in.
Go ahead, Suvi.
Thanks, Matt. The reason why I got into solar was because obviously it's the right thing for the planet from my perspective in terms of clean energy, but it's also superior technology to any other energy technology that exists. I can get into 10 reasons why that is, but I won't bore you with those details. But it is a disruptive technology within the energy landscape. You can use it for a village hut, you can use it for a house, you can use it for a building, you can use it for large-scale utility plants, and it follows a semiconductor cost curve, which coal and gas and all just cannot compete with. So it is a superior technology. So to Josh's thing, it's not that you're doing it only because it's the right thing to do. Because ultimately, our economic incentive system is broken here, but as an entrepreneur or emerging growth company, you're not going to fix that. You got to focus on how to build a real business. And so that to me is embedded, and our mission in our company is very clear. We want to transform the energy industry to be powered by solar because it's the right thing to do. But day to day, we make a business based on how we can make better products, better services, serve customers. It's basic, bread and butter stuff about creating a business. But I think that's one of the benefits of being in this industry in sustainable energy and clean energy is that's a natural part of what you do, and that's why a lot of people get into it. But the focus then really is how to build a better business. And we have made certain business decisions that I would say aren't really about a profit motive, but more about spreading, making solar more competitive. For example, licensing our technology in certain applications that we don't make a lot of money off of it. It's not a big revenue generator. It's not a big income generator for us. But if we can make solar more competitive in markets that we're not participating in against fossil fuels, absolutely, I feel like we have a moral imperative to do that as business leaders.
Matt, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, look, I was just going to comment briefly that, what we see is not so much, I fully agree with both what Josh and Suvi had to say. I think what we see sort of in the public markets and the big investment funds and sovereign wealth and pension funds around the world is that, they are starting to take these sort of environmental and sustainability related questions very, very seriously and are divesting themselves in some cases from investments that don't meet those goals. That doesn't mean they're looking for unprofitable investments. And so it's, you still need to, make sure that, you are ensuring reasonable and appropriate returns for your investors at the same time as hewing to that line of ensuring that you're driving those environmental and sustainability questions forward as well.
So we actually have reached the end of time of our time together today. Believe it or not, went very quickly. So any final thoughts in the 30 seconds? Like, what are the things that we should be thinking about? The one thing that we should be thinking about as we continue through this pandemic? Who'd like to start?
I'll start.
Go
ahead, Josh. I'll start. Look, I would say keep your head down and focus on what you got to get done, but at the same time, keep your head up and keep looking around because there are tremendous opportunities that are starting to emerge And for the companies that can come through this, companies and organizations and whatever individuals who can come through this period, not just surviving, but stronger and more attuned to what's going on around them, those entities are going to thrive in the world after this.
Yeah.
Josh?
Yeah, I was going to add that this is probably the most exciting time since the creation of Standard Oil to be in the energy industry. It's moving fast. You know, we're seeing growth that we've never seen. We've got an opportunity here to reform what our electrical grid and consumption vehicles look like, and that's an exciting place, I think, for professionals. So my closing thought is that if you are a professional, whether it's your first career or your fourth career, I encourage you to leverage your way into the energy industry, renewable energy industries, because we need great people, we need thought leaders who are going to drive things to market, and you know, the train has already left the station, and it's an exciting place to be.
Sunny?
Sure. So I'll go. I think the pandemic actually brought in a lot of opportunities for the renewable energies and renewable companies that seem to be a catalyst for carbon reduction, which is like something that renewable energy could really help to sustain or accelerate. There has been a number of legal, like from legal perspective, there has been a number of the bills or actually passed rules and things like that that will bring opportunities for energy, for renewable energy. So something companies should be aware of and watch out for. Also, from the supply chain perspective, be proactive, manage your supply chain risk, identify the risks, and diversify your supply chain, be flexible. I think that's a key also, just to minimize that risk going forward.
Fantastic. And Suvi?
Yeah, real quick. I think the pandemic is laying bare open a lot of things, including what's really important, what's more competitive, and we're seeing an acceleration of renewables around the world as a result of that. And you can see that in, you know, ExxonMobil no longer in the leader list anymore in terms of market cap and so on, and renewable energy companies increasing. So I think this is really bearing open, like what's more competitive, what's real, and that's what needs to happen. But I'm glad to see renewables. We're winning the good fight against fossil fuels.
Well, I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in and are viewing with us. I want to thank all of our panelists today and wish the rest of you a very good afternoon. Thank you all very much.